Hey, friends. Welcome to the Way of Valor. I am your host, Angie Taylor. And guys, we got a great one on for you today. I have with me today Jim Piper Jr. He actually is a new to me friend. I had the beautiful opportunity to join him on his podcast about a month ago on Today Counts show. So, welcome to the show, Jim Piper.
Thank you, Angie. It was fun talking to you last time. I don't know if that was about a month ago, but
Yeah.
glad to be on the other side of the microphone, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. We got to unpack all things education for I think almost an hour. It was very fun to do that, and so through that conversation, though, it became really clear that you were somebody that I needed to have on my show. What you are doing in your Lead Today community is really powerful and really needed. And I know my audience is going to love it. We serve a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners in this community. And so we need voices like yours at our table to help us. So I'd love for you to share with us just a little bit about your work with Lead Today community.
Sure. Well, we're kind of changing, Angie. We're kind of changing our business model because I'm getting older. that's that's the practical reason why we're changing, and we're trying to figure out whether we want the Lead Today community to exist beyond my time. And so to do that, we've been thinking about, well, what does scaling look like? What is more possible moving into the future? So I'll describe to you our emerging business model and see if that helps. So the podcast, that Today Count show, is what we want to be the center of our ministry. And we're still learning how to do that podcast well. We're still learning about what topics we want and personalities we want to have on the show. We're about a year and a half into it. And I can't say that we have arrived there yet, but we're trying to figure out how to bring value to intellectual ideas regarding business, regarding leadership. We are very much a faith centered organization, yet we think that we are able to serve across borders, so to speak. Whether it's Fortune 500 companies or the local entrepreneur, senior pastor, church planter, whatever it might be. And then the second level is writing. We have a commitment to writing and creating things that are helpful for people, so that can be as evergreen as possible. And then we do advisement and speaking, engagements to help teams or leaders and whatever. So that's the kind of the three rungs, which is different than how we were doing it 5 years ago.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, you guys, I've checked out your resources and they are many, and I would encourage our audience to go check them out too, especially in the business, if you're in the business community. I'm curious if you have watched over the years, you're a long time in this business, and I'm curious if you would say there are very common things that every business owner and business leader encounter that you end up consulting on. These are the things that if you were to pare it down to three, what would those be?
That's a great question. Off the top of my head, the way that I would describe it is, obviously there are some basic business acumen that we all need, to have, so that we can, navigate the pragmatics of business. And then, of course, there is the broad topic, which is really the big topic, which is really the reason why we get called more than any other reason, which is the people. Anything having to do with people. To be more specific, people might be able to draw up a strategic plan, but they often have times getting the people committed to it, owning it, knowing what their part is. And then I would say that another column in that whole area is in the process of org charts, strategic plans. Really, it comes down to this idea of alignment. Are we aligned from our purpose to our values to our behaviors? And of course, another word for the character of an organization is the culture of the organization. I use probably those two terms interchangeably, character and culture. I think in the end, character is what an organization does. It's how it behaves. And then if you're trying to figure out why does it behave that way, then that might be more of a cultural kind of descent in understanding. And then, how do you begin to massage those cultural muscles to shape the character in the way that you want it to go? So for example, um, the joke I usually tell is when my phone rings, it's because there's conflict. And I think all leaders who are, and I mean all leaders who are authentic to some level would agree with me to say that when you step into leadership, you step into conflict. You are creating conflict just by having a vision. You're creating ripples in the world, and so you're going to have conflict. Not all conflict is difficult or bad. It's friction or whatever, but often things get challenging when you're dealing with a variety of variables. That was a lot of words.
Yeah, no, I think it's so good. I mean, it's funny. I have often said in my role as head of school, I used to be a firefighter in my early 20s. And what I can tell you is that job prepared me incredibly well uh, for my role as head of school because I often have felt like I show up every day with my hose looking for the hot spots in the fires that are my job to help put out. So let's rest on that because I do, from a personal level, people have definitely been the business acumen. If it's just up to me studying and doing research and grabbing a hold of that, I can do that.
How to
It's
read an income
people.
statement, a balance sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the thing that just eludes myself often or other people is the people piece. What are important things that you have found in just being incredibly helpful? And it's funny because I think whether you're a business owner, whether you're just in a business, or even in your own family life, whatever principles you're about to say would be incredibly helpful to understand in navigating people.
Yeah, well, that's a really big question. I'll try to answer that quickly. I actually have a philosophy of approach to that, and the first, I wish life were more linear than it is, and I realize it's not. I wish it was step one, step two, step three, but you're often doing step two the same time you're doing step seven, and what have you. So maybe we can use the term priority. I kind of see three broad priorities. The first one is my person. If I don't spend time with God alone, I mean, I'm not talking about a quick drive by. I'm not talking about listening to a worship song or reading my chapter in Proverbs that day. I mean, I'm talking about some laying on the couch, where he is the therapist and I am the
Good.
patient. And it's really important because I need to understand who I am in Christ. And I sometimes forget who I am in Christ. And I'm so focused on my performance and how I feel and all of these other things. I mean, even some of your basic questions like what is a human and what is a healthy human? And what do I know about my temperament? How do I work best? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my wounds? How am I doing with my wounds? How am I doing with my
Mhm.
hurts of the past? What kind of grudges am I carrying? When a certain name, a person's name comes up, does it still rub me a certain way like it did 10 years ago? Am I growing, in these things? And it sounds more black and blue than I'm making it sound, but it's really spending time with God to get me right. Now, here's the thing that I've noticed
Mhm.
is that I get cold fast, so it can't be just something I do once a month. It's got to be part of my rhythm. Now, if and this is what I call from the inside out, because typically, Angie, what I have found, particularly with business leaders who are often type A individuals, they start on the outside meaning their job, their work, the
Mhm.
profit and loss, the problem employee, the marriage, the kid that's having trouble in school, whatever the threats are, we tend to live out there first, and then what happens is that it kind of flows upstream into our relationships and poisons our relationships. And if our relationships are poisoned, it tends to poison us. So the reason why you mentioned you say well, what about people? Well, again, I'll say the best thing I can do for others is I've really got to have that dedication to create a healthy me, and also recognizing that I'm not 100% healthy. Um, but as I do that, and then a healthy me spills out into my relationships. Now, here's what I would say about relationships in short. I'm always fascinated where Jesus had all these followers, and 440, 12, but he very clearly chose 12. He very clearly chose them. He literally picked them out from the group. And and I believe that one of the things that will strengthen our people skills and our ability to lead people is to choose them. Now, here's what I mean. I don't mean, I'm not just simply talking about hiring. I'm not talking about, those kinds of things. But for example, I stood at the altar with my wife almost 45 years ago, and I vowed to her certain things, and she vowed to me certain things. And in that moment, I chose her. I chose that she would be my only girl. I chose that I would be faithful to her. I chose, all these things, for better, for worse, richer, for poor, all those kinds of things. One thing I've learned about a marriage is I've got to choose her all the time. I can't just choose her then, and because it wears off, you forget.
Yeah.
So I have to realize that as a leader, I am limited in my capacity. And so when you think about org charts, when you think about influence, you only have a certain amount of capacity. And the people that you are closest to you in whatever categories that you're going to create, you need to go through a regular process of choosing them. Now, you may not tell them that you're choosing them, but you would say to yourself, I choose you. And what it does is it helps you right fit what relationships really are. Otherwise, we're just looking for the easy in relationships, and
Mm,
anytime a relationship
mm,
gets hard, we take the exit. And I think that when you look at it from a biblical perspective, a Christian worldview, biblical worldview, relationships are going to be as iron sharpens iron. Relationships are going to be, sometimes I'm getting the short end of the stick, sometimes I'm getting the benefit of it. And then finally, as I build healthy relationships, I'm able to take a healthier me, a healthier set of relationships into my places of challenge. And that's, that's a long version to your answer, but it's kind of a short version for how I would explain it more. I guess the key word is intentionality. That would be the key
yeah.
word.
Yeah. Well, and what I've discovered over the years is the most important thing I could do as a leader was be in tune to what are my tendencies when I'm unhealthy and what are my
Okay.
tendencies when I'm healthy, in order to start recognizing when this is a me problem or this is an external problem, because often it would be easy to make everything the external when in reality some days I need to put myself in timeout.
Yeah,
And
you need to give it a name, and because when you
yeah,
give it a name, it brings it right sizes, situation. I mean, if you're going through a
that's good.
huge trial or through a huge challenge, and you don't acknowledge it, you don't say it out loud, you don't give it a name, and then it's like a cloud that's over your head that you just can't, get away. But the way I say it to folks is that if you're dealing with the Goliath now, say, I'm dealing with the giant right now. And then as soon as you acknowledge that, it's amazing how that giant shrinks down to a size that doesn't look as big as it once did. Hey, I'm going through a rough
Right,
season right now. I'm going through a season
right.
of exhaustion. I'm going through a season of conflict. I'm going through a season of, you know, um, and then to be careful to not to try to get out of those seasons that are uncomfortable too quickly, because the value in going through those seasons is exponentially beneficial to the new you on the other side, of
Mm-hmm.
that. And of course, relationships are going to be involved in 75% of
Yeah.
those, tough seasons, are they not?
So tell us, like, how is it different then when we're talking about people and addressing the people versus culture in our homes or our businesses? How would you separate those or distinguish between those, the need to focus on them?
Like the categories, is that what you're asking
Yeah,
me? Like that?
yeah, because you
Okay.
used it as a third category. And how would you, why is that a
Yeah.
different category than people?
Oh, you mean place? How is place different than people? Yeah.
How is culture different? Yeah.
Oh, how is culture different? Okay, okay. Yeah, well, there's several exercises that I like to do with leaders, and we're talking about um, people who are too busy to do this. But if they aren't willing to do this, I don't work with them.
Hmm.
It's just that simple. I lay down some pretty significant things, and one thing I found, Angie, is it doesn't matter whether someone's making $50 million a year or 50,000 a year. They're all made the same, and so I have found that this works. One of the things that I do that might get to your answer, and if it doesn't, or your question, if it doesn't, let me know. Again, if you take the three P's that I talked about, your person, your people, and your place. When I'm moving from thinking about how healthy or unhealthy I am, then I'm starting to think about my relationships. The first thing I do is I use a Remarkable, it's an electronic notebook,
Hmm.
and I just start writing the names of people that I think are in my life. And it's always interesting to see when I start slowing down, right? So I mean, obviously I can write my seven grandchildren, my wife, my kids, their spouses, and then, oh yeah, there's mom and dad, and then once we get a little bit past that, I might think of, okay, then there's the people on my team, and I'll start writing those names down. But it's always interesting when you have a pause where you're having to go, okay, gosh, I know that I have more people in my life than this, and you're pausing. Well, that sends you a message right there, right? It sends you a message that if you're having to really think about who have I left out, you probably haven't chosen them, because if you've chosen
Hmm.
them, you're praying for them. And when it comes to the different cultures, in the last chapter of a book that I just read, I was coaching a lady by the name of Erin Porteous, who is the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Denver, which I believe is the second or third largest club in America, and it's a significant role and responsibility. And one of the things that she taught me, and that's the beautiful thing of what I get to do, I learn more from my clients than they learn from me. I can tell you that right now. And what she said is that she talks about her four values, and that she believes that her four values should be consistent from home to work to wherever ever they are. So if I were to interpret your question correctly, if I follow Aaron's advice, though my work culture might be a little bit different than my family culture or my neighborhood or my church, or whatever environment, that the person that I bring into each of those cultures has an effect on each of those cultures. Now, if I'm in the first
Hmm.
chair to be the champion of a certain culture, and then obviously I'm going to be more intentional about how I'm going to do that. So for me, I have a significant role in my local church, and so I press pretty well into the muscle of that. In Jim's vernacular, I have a thing called wins and sins. When I see behaviors that are thumbs up, I point it out. I say that's a win. And if I see behavior that does not align with our culture, I'll call it a sin. Now, I won't come down the person's throat, because I'm also be quick to admit my own sins. I'll say, Auntie, I blew that. That was a sin, not a win, because, and then explain why. I think there was a book that came out many, many years ago called The 1 Minute Manager, which is about keeping short accounts. I think short accounts has a lot to do with keeping your family culture the way you want it. I have a friend who said it this way: what you ignore becomes more, and what you address becomes less. And
Sure.
I really like that because it describes what leadership is. It's diligence. Doesn't mean that you're micromanaging. It doesn't mean that you're looking, down everyone's, breathing down everyone's neck. But it does mean that you don't look away. You don't look
Hmm.
away at things. And it also is not a negative thing. Building culture, if you do it the way I do, wins and sins. People know that when I do mention a sin, I'm not like down in the dumps. I'm not negative
Sure.
about it. I just say, hey, that was a sin. We blew that. It doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. If it's a win, it's a high five. I don't
I
know if I
love
answered.
that, Nick. Yeah, no, it did. It was a great answer. And I love that it creates an honest culture when you're willing to acknowledge the wins as well as the sins. I think it creates a very honest culture where people are safe to both win and fail in the community. I would love to shift gears a little bit because I'm really excited to get my hands on your new book. You have a new book out called Story: The Art of Learning from our past. And I'd love for you to talk about your book to us and what prompted the writing of this, as well as, what's the high level 30,000 foot overview of what we can find in this.
Well, I'm speaking to a woman of leadership right now who told me enough about her story last time that we were together, where from the outside looking in, it's extremely clear to me how God has prepared you for what you're doing today. Unfortunately, a lot of people go through stuff and they just don't know how to interpret it. They take more of a victim mentality. And whether they're willing to admit it or not, Angie, what they do is they get mad at God. And a lot of folks who call themselves atheists are far from being atheistic. What they are is they're mad at God, because what we
Mm,
want is we want things how we want them, when we want them. And, God doesn't work that way. And I think that I noticed something in my life, in my younger life, is that when good things happen, I was good, and when bad things happen, I was bad. I was down in the dumps, and it just kind of showed me. Even though I'm not much of a feeler, I'm more of a logical thinker. I mean, I'm a grandpa now, so I cry more than I ever have. I've got more people to cry over and to love, and love is pain, if you ask me. They're synonymous. You better be careful what you ask
sure.
God for, because it comes with a price tag.
Right. Right.
I do believe that habitual worry. I'm not sure that when someone gets worried, it's a sin, but I think habitual worry is probably a sin, and I have to watch that, because I want to control the safety and the mind and the heart of my grandkids, and I want to play God, right? And that's the situation. But anyway, the book is broken up into three parts. Things that we can learn from our childhood. And I know that there's a lot of people, particularly some of the businessmen that I work with, that they don't want to talk about their childhood, and I just don't let them off the hook, because I was that guy. I said, move on. Well, why are you talking about fifth grade for? That's pathetic. And
Hmm.
so the first section of the book is lessons I learned and we can learn from our childhood. And the second section is lessons that we learn from significant relationships in our life, relationships that we may not always see as positive, but with the right interpretation. In fact, that's my point. I'm not sure we're good interpreters of our story. And so
Mm,
the idea is maybe to challenge that and say, there's a lot more good going on in your life than you realize if you'll take the time to think about it and to realize that God is writing the story. He's the author. And get this, he's willing to pin you into the story. And even more than that, he's willing to hand you a pen and have you help him in the co-authoring of your story. And then the final section is leadership lessons. Um, so that's how the book is broken up, and I think it will appeal to it's just who I am. Whenever I have consultants try to help me, they want to pin me down, pin me down, pin me down as to a very exact group that I'm going after. But when I pastor churches, one of the reasons why they grew, I think, is because I tend to think broader, and so I think the book I think the book speaks to women and men. I think the book speaks to those who see themselves as leaders and those who don't. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I had a lot of fun writing it. In fact, I had so much fun. It brought me to the front porch of the next book that I'm already working on.
That is exciting. And when can we expect that next book?
As you can see, if you're watching on video, I've got an arm brace on, and it's amazing how much we need both hands to type nowadays. So I'm ready to go. I've already got my outline done. I've got a lot of the research done, and I would say that I'll probably crank it out within 4 to 5 months. That's usually how long it takes me, and then you know how that goes. It's another 3 or 4 months to get it finishing the pub. So, certainly by this time next year, hopefully before.
I love the depth of resources that you address because so often in the business community in particular, we're very temporal in the physical realm, and your ability to be transcendent in the work that you're doing is so critical to actual transformation happening in the lives and minds of the business owners. And so I would encourage all of our people to go track you down. What's the best way to find you, to grab a hold of your resources, get your new book? Where can we find you?
Well, for right now, the book is easier to find on Amazon.com because we just launched it a couple of days ago. Eventually, it'll be. I mean, does anybody really buy books at bookstores anymore? So I would just say I go into bookstores for ideas. That's why I go in there. But Amazon, the book is Story. It's on Amazon, and you can find me at leadtodaycommunity.com. Leadtodaycommunity.com. It's probably the central spot to go.
And we will drop that all of that in our show notes because we want to make sure that you get linked to Jim, the work he's doing. It has been an honor to have you on our show today. I'm excited to read your book personally and to share you out with our community. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Angie, and I'm excited about what you and Valor is doing. And I've already talked to all kinds of people about it. People that are in education, hearing theories, sharing yours, and it's still having a ripple effect on this side of the world.
Well, I am thrilled to hear that. It's so good when God's people come together with their gifts at the table. Hey, friends, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you share it out with your friends. Tell your friends all about Jim, the work that he's doing, the resources that he has. And then if you could go on and give us a 5-star review, that helps all the algorithm business and helps get the word out. Thanks for listening today.